Well, hello, everybody. Mic working okay? Can everyone hear me? Hi, Liz. All right, that's a yes. Hello, Miles. Nice to see all of you. Boarders, you had to be here. Day students, you chose to be here. And in both cases, we're very excited to see you and to have you. I'm excited that tonight we have a panel of college admissions officers who are very generously sharing their time and their expertise with you all tonight. The format of tonight will be a panel discussion moderated by Mr. Johnson, who, as you know, in addition to chairing the English department and teaching English and doing TAS and doing ISP and virtually everything else, is also a member of the college counseling team. And so tonight what I think is really cool is that you guys are going to have a chance not to hear from me or Mrs. Liu or Mr. Johnson about the college application and admissions process, but you'll get to hear about it from the perspective of the college admissions office, which I think is pretty neat. And so I'm excited for you guys to learn from what is shared. And so before I turn things over, let me introduce each of the panelists who we have with us tonight. So Asma Malik is the Associate Director of Admissions for the New York Metro office at Syracuse University in Manhattan and a fellow Long Islander. She completed her BA and BS in Education and Biology from Hunter College and went on to complete her master's degree in International Education from New York University. After graduating, she went on to work for the United Nations Security Council, only to realize that her true passion was higher education. She began her admissions career at NYU Law and finished her NYU chapter as the Senior Assistant Director of Undergraduate Admissions in 2016. She's been with Syracuse University for 3 years and loves their strong sense of community, even though she's not on campus every day. Go Orange. To Asma's left is Austin Kelso. Austin has been in undergraduate admissions for the past 3 years, having previously worked in adolescent health and sport for development in Johannesburg, South Africa. Shout out to Jan. He currently serves as an assistant director. Oh, and Tony, if Tony is here. Yeah, Tony, okay. He currently serves as an assistant director of admission for the University of Richmond. In this capacity, he works with prospective and admitted students from New York and Ohio. He also serves as the program director for the University of Richmond's Student Ambassador Program and works closely with social media and on-campus event programming. Austin received his Bachelor of Arts in Environmental Studies with a minor in Geography and the Environment from the University of Richmond. He has experience in first-year and transfer admission and is passionate about connecting with both students and alumni around the world. To Austin's left, please forgive me if I mispronounce your last name, Robert Pertizotti is the Associate Dean of Admissions and Director of Admissions Recruitment at Stony Brook University. Mr. Pertizotti's career in higher education and counseling has spanned the past 32 years. In his position of Associate Dean of Admissions and Director of Admissions Recruitment at Stony Brook University, he coordinates student recruitment outreach and works very closely with the high school counseling community. As a leader in higher education, Rob has served the college admissions and counseling community in a variety of leadership roles and held key positions on professional organizations such as Western Suffolk Counselors Association, New York Counseling Association, and the New York State Association for College Admissions Counseling. In 2008, he was recognized as Administrator of the Year, and in 2010 for Distinguished Service, both by Western Suffolk Counselors Association. Firmly believing in the importance of professional development and sharing of ideas, Rob has presented workshops on topics in admissions and enrollment at conferences and forums at the local, state, and national levels. Prior to joining the staff at Stony Brook, Rob worked at Hofstra University as Associate Director of Admissions and Assistant Director of Academic Advising. As an alumnus of Stony Brook, he earned a Bachelor of Arts degree in Psychology and continued on to earn a Master's of Science degree with distinction in Counseling and Education at Hofstra University. Now, for the fun stuff. No, I think we should. So also known as His Royal Highness, in his spare time he enjoys interior design, fashion, shopping, visiting local vineyards, and of course, spending time with his incredible and adorable Cavalier King Charles Spaniel, Bailey. Typical Virgo, Rob takes organization to the extreme. He feels that life is good when everything is in its place. He's also an avid auto enthusiast and can be easily found around town spinning his wheels in the ultimate driving machine. So Ozma, Austin, and Rob, we are so thankful to have you guys with us tonight. We're very excited to learn from your expertise and your insights. And so without further ado, let me turn things over to Mr. Johnson.
All right, so panelists, thank you very much. So as Mr. Struck indicated, we're just going to be working our way through a set of topics, and I'd like you to feel free to sort of contribute whatever seems to be important and on your mind about these topics. And then, Mr. Struck, you do want to kind of, after each topic, allow a little bit of audience sort of clarification. So for those of you sitting out in our seats, right, so these are the topics we're going to be working our way through, and we're going to give you an opportunity to ask questions related first to the application process, standardized testing, personal statements and supplements, decision-making process, financial aid, and just cover overall college experience, right? So as you hear the panelists offer some reflections on each of these topics, and the benefit of their experience, if they say some things that provoke a question for you, or if you've got a question that hasn't been quite addressed by what they've reflected on, we'll pause and give you an opportunity to inject a question. Okay, so panelists, let's start with the application process, right? So we'd like to hear from you about what we should know, what our students should know about the application process. Maybe, Asma, if we could begin with you.
Sure. So I'll just go over kind of the general overview of the admissions process. Sorry. Can everyone hear me? Yes. Okay. All right. So I'm going to go over the general overview for the admissions process. When you submit your application, I would say the most common route is using the Common Application. Everyone heard of Common App? Yes? Nod if you're awake. Okay. All right. Some institutions will have their individual applications. So when we receive the Common App, we will receive some supplement documents alongside it. So transcript would be one of them. Standardized exams is another. We're going to also receive a list of your extracurriculars. There'll be a Common Application essay, and then depending on the institution you're applying to, you might have to do a supplement essay as well. When the admissions committee gets together, they will look at every single part of the application. So a common term that does come up is holistic review. You'll hear this often. This means when we're looking at an application, we're just not looking at the end GPA or your test scores. We're taking everything into account. So your transcript, the rigor associated with that, the trends in that. We're looking at your standardized exams and how they fall in within our range. For every institution is different, and we'll take into account how you utilize your time outside of the classroom. We're going to try to get a sense of your personality through your essays, and then if there's a supplement essay, we will use that to determine fit for the institution. So how do your passions and your future aspirations actually align with the institution that you're applying to? So all of these things are taken into account. A lot of students feel like they need to have a well-rounded application. You should really think of it, we're trying to put a well-rounded class together. So maybe you have a strength in one area and a weakness in another. We will try to find students that maybe can balance out that weakness, because when we're putting the class together, we want to make sure that everyone's adding to the depth and richness on campus. I'll let my peers talk. I don't want to keep on going.
Just think of this as a partnership. It's a dialogue between you as a student and those of us in college admissions. We need your help in telling your story. The story is academic, the story is non-academic, it's cultural, it's social. All these elements that Asma was talking about, really, it talks about fit, and fit is a very different thing for many different students. Go with your gut, go with your heart. Don't look at schools that you think are the right schools because my friends are doing this or my parents are making me apply to these schools. Do you see yourself there? Do you feel you'll be challenged there? Do you think you'll be comfortable there? Those are the things that you need to be thinking about. I'm going back to the comment I'm a Virgo and I'm very proud of. I'm a list maker. So think about those things that are must-haves for you in your college. You know, your first exercise in this whole process is really reflecting on what are the must-haves, what are the deal breakers in this process. So as you start getting all these wonderful brochures from us, and by the way, you're going to, more than likely, once you take the PSAT and you indicate that, yes, I'd like to receive college brochures, guess what happens? You receive lots of them, and you'll get lots of emails. But you're going to need to create a list of, you know, those schools that are going to be, yes, high on the list, those that are, I don't know, and those that go directly to recycle. And that's okay, we won't take that personally. You'll also need to think about those schools that are within a range of your admission. So those that are target schools, your profile, your academic profile fits within the range of what we publish on our websites. And we're pretty transparent about that. You need to do your homework, see where you fit on that continuum. Don't use it as the only gauge whether or not you should apply to a school, but think about where do I fit in that academic sort of story. A target school is the school that your profile is right in line. A reach school, and all students, you should have reach schools. You should aspire to have dreams. But your profile might be a little bit lower than what that school publishes on the website. And then there's this, we call the safe school, but I don't think there's anything safe anymore in today's world. But a safe school would be listed as those schools that your profile exceeds. It's higher than what that school publishes. So you want to have a couple of schools in each of those three categories. You want to make sure that not only do you have a school that fits what you want, but also a school that you'll be hopefully admitted to. And I also would encourage you to think about keeping that list down. 20 schools to apply to is not going to do yourself any service at all, because if you're admitted to 15 out of those 20 schools come May 1st of your senior year, you still have some more work to do to whittle that down. So do your research ahead of time and see where do you fit in, what's a good fit for you. Make sure you visit, and we'll talk all about the things you need to be doing in the process. But it's your process. You must lead it. It's not us telling you where to apply. It's not your friends. You have to do the work. You're going to do the essay. You're going to reach out to us. We're not the gatekeepers that we're often accused of being. We need your help to sort of decide, is this the good fit for you, and are you a good fit for us? Likewise, are we a good fit for you?
I think my colleagues covered that pretty thoroughly, so I have nothing to add. Yeah, and I think as you're looking at schools, right, some colleges will have what you call a direct entry program, where you are applying directly into a certain major or a certain school, right? So you might be applying into a business school or into a nursing program. But we understand that you're juniors, right? So you're 16, 17, anyone 18 here? You, all right. We understand that for you all, it's a lot to ask you, I think, to have the rest of your lives figured out at 16, 17, and 18. As you're sitting here, you might not know exactly what you want to do. You might be thinking, I'm passionate about this subject, I'm passionate about that. But I'm not exactly sure where I want to go or what I want to major in. And so as you're looking at schools, you're thinking about fit, which Robert was talking about. It's okay to be undecided as you're applying to colleges. You don't have to know what program you want to apply into, right? And a lot of schools will give you that first year to test the waters, to dip your feet into different subject areas, and allow you to figure out, what is something that I want to do? What's a major or a minor that I'm passionate about before you have to actually go and declare? And so as you're thinking about schools, don't be afraid to be undecided. That is okay. And I think as you're looking at your peers, some people might know, I want to do this, right? And don't be pressured into having that feeling that I also need to know exactly what I want to do. When we read applications, we know that you're undecided. And so we're looking at your academic performance and your personality as really those key factors into making that admission decision, not so much that you know exactly what you want to do with the rest of your life or exactly which program or major that you want to go into. And so as you're thinking about the application, don't be afraid to be undecided.
I think we also need to remember about deadlines too, because the tax deadline's coming, isn't it really soon? So it reminds us that there are deadlines at admissions too. You might have all heard things like early decision, early action. Are you aware of these early programs? Have you heard of those before? Yes. So think about this. If you're looking at a school early decision, because you're applying one school early decision, and you don't have to apply any, but if you choose, it's one. And it should be the school that you really feel it's where you want to go. And, you know, you've bought into the whole branding of the school. You looked at that profile and you fit within that profile. It has the programs that you want, but it's commitment, right? We apply one school early decision. If admitted, we are contractually, any attorneys in the audience, obligated to attend that institution unless the only thing that exonerates, good SAT word, exonerates us from the early decision commitment is an unrealistic financial aid packet. However, and this is a big however, when you're having this conversation about fit, don't negate that piece of the conversation. You know, you have to think about, well, how will I afford a particular institution? What type of aid is available? How will I apply? What will I qualify for? What type of scholarships? Not that I'm saying you need to make your decisions solely on cost, but don't exclude that conversation when you're having this important fit conversation. So early decision, you apply one. It's usually an early decision deadline, maybe in November, early December. And the other thing about early decision, which is sort of scary, I find, is that if you are admitted, you have to withdraw your applications from every other school to which you've been, have applied. So it's really serious. Early action, similar, but without the commitment in most cases. You apply early, you hear early. You still have, in most cases, till the May 1st national deadline to make your commitment, which is what most students do. There are some exceptions. You know, there's some early action programs where it's early action single choice and different deadlines and whatnot, but just be sure that if you're applying early, my advice to you is it's a school that's on your radar. It's not just because it's a strategy, because some folks think that it's easier to get into a school early decision or early action. In some cases it might be, but not always. Because what we can do in this process is we can admit, yay, we can deny, not so good. We can defer, which then means we take your application and we put it in the general pool and take a look at you later in the context of the wider applicant pool. So those are things that might happen in those early programs. We are not the IRS. We do not give extensions on deadlines, so that you must make sure that not only do you press submit on the common application, but all those elements of the application, like your transcript and your recommendations and your essay and all those elements, have to be reached on the campus by the deadline. So it's not just at 11:45 p.m. you've hit press submit and you're done. It's not that. Always backtrack and be kind to your counselors because they need to do some things to get that information to us as well. So always backtrack. If an early decision or early action deadline is early to mid-November, you backtrack your work at least 4 to 6 weeks. Make sure everything's in place prior to that, okay? Deadlines are important. You own this, remember that.
I just want to say something about transcripts. So like my colleague mentioned, you know, you can apply undecided, you can apply to particular majors. One thing you should do your research on, if you're thinking about maybe going into engineering, look at some of the schools that you're interested in. You want to make sure that you at least have the minimum academic requirement. Many engineering programs will only take students that have physics, chemistry, biology, and pre-calculus on their transcript before they graduate high school. If you're thinking about business school, now more than ever, business schools are like, you need to be pre-calc ready before you graduate. I have a lot of experience with this school. I would say students are very well prepared, and this is something we will take into account. When we're looking at the transcript, it's not just the NGPA. We're gonna look to see what classes you've taken in the context of the high school you attend. How have you challenged yourself within the resources that are available to you? And challenge doesn't mean, you know, take the most AP and the most college prep courses you can. It's really, you need, everyone's threshold is different. Everyone's limit is different. So you challenge yourself appropriately. But if you're thinking about some very specific majors, it's better to do your research now so that you know what classes you need to take senior year to make you competitive in that application process. And life happens. You're 16, 17, 18 years old. Things happen. Maybe you have a dip in a class or a semester. It's better for you to address that in the application than let us sit there and assume, all right, the student just got lazy, because there might be more to that situation. So you need to advocate for yourself in the application process. That's the biggest thing. This is your time to shine. This is the time you need to brag. appropriately, in a mature manner. But you need to make sure that we get the full picture, your full story in high school, so we can determine if you're the right fit for whatever institution you're applying to.
Thank you. I also think, but as we're considering the application process, we have a number of students here who are international, and we're wondering if you could offer some thoughts about the application process from the point of view of international students. Are there any particular things they ought to be aware of or challenges in the application process that are maybe unique to international students?
Definitely, right? I think for international students, sometimes there will be additional pieces of application material you might need to send in. And I think at times for some schools, the financial aid process might look a little bit different for international students. So I'll speak for Richmond, and Stony Brook and Syracuse might be a little bit different. For example, at Richmond, for our international students, or I should say for our domestic students, we're need blind in our admission process. So that's to say that if you apply for financial aid, that will have no bearing on your admission decision. So if you're a full pay student or a full need student, that won't affect your admission decision, or won't play a part in the admission process. For our international students, for example, we are need aware. And so you will have to submit a financial certification as a piece of your application. And so we are considering your ability to pay as a piece of your application. Additionally, you might see some schools will require a TOEFL score or IELTS score for English proficiency as another piece of your application. But again, for that piece, some schools might also waive that as well. So for us, if you attend a 4-year or a high school where all 4 years of instruction are taught in English, we can waive that need for the TOEFL. Or if you're scoring above certain thresholds on the standardized test scores for evidence-based reading or English, we can also go ahead and waive that test score as well. So there might be some additional pieces of application material. As you're sitting here as juniors and you're thinking about what schools you want to apply to, it's worth doing the research to know what schools require what for the financial aid process, as well as any additional pieces of application material or tests that you must submit. Every school will be a little bit different, and it's worth doing the research now so that you know that if they're going to waive the TOEFL for me, you don't have to go ahead and take that extra test, right? I know you're already doing so much work as high school students. You're already taking the standardized test scores, so you might be able to knock off another test that you might have to take.
Just one last piece for international students. Your writing is going to be a piece that's very important to some of us as well. And consistency in the story. So your TOEFL score or your IELTS score should be consistent with the writing sample, again, because you want to make sure that you are equipped to begin your college career at our institution with the expectations of all of our students. Or if some students who have to hone in on some of those writing skills, we might need to have a conversation about taking some additional support courses to help bring you to that level. So the writing sample for us is going to be very, very important. It's not just telling your story, but how can you articulate your ideas? What is your command of the English language? Because that's the expectation that we're going to have of all of our students in our academic classes.
I agree with everything they said.
I think since we, yes, indeed. So I think since we've transitioned a little bit into sort of testing topics with TOEFL, why don't we take this opportunity maybe to ask you as a panel to consider what our students should know about testing, not just TOEFL, but other kinds of important testings, and then we'll maybe pause after you talk about testing and see if there are any questions.
So you'll notice that there are some schools that are test optional, and there are some schools that are test mandatory, I guess, or still test mandatory. And what we do in the process, many different things will happen. I represent a test mandatory school, and for us, we look at a few different types of scores. You've probably heard of the SAT, you've probably heard of the ACT. Many schools will take either or. You've probably heard this term called super score. Sounds like a superhero, right? It's really where schools will take your highest subset of the score, so with the SAT, the highest reading, and the highest math. In some cases on the ACT, some schools will super score, and they'll take the highest of the many different subset scores to get a score that's going to be in your favor. that'll reflect the highest level in terms of your score. Not all schools do that, so it's important that you know which schools do that. And which schools will accept both the SAT or the ACT, and many schools who would require the subject tests. Those are very particular exams that are measuring content within a given area. And in particular, some of the most selective schools across the country will require one or two of those exams. The best time to take them, and it's hard to predict this certainly, is certainly shortly after you've taken the course because it's fresh in your mind. And so you're more likely to do really well on that exam. We can't always be that predictive, but we try. Deadlines are important. If you're going to apply to a school early decision, but you're not going to take that other SAT until December, that could be a problem because that's not going to be a score that's going to be used in consideration because it's after the deadline of admission. So keep that in mind as well. It's not just what exam is required or permitted at what school. When is the last test day that I could take these exams to get to that school for consideration? And then there's the whole question of, well, how many times do I take these exams, right? And I'm never a big advocate of over-testing, but typically from the first to the second test administration, we see a general increase in scores. From the second to the third to the fourth to the fifth to the sixth to the seventh, please don't do that. We don't see a significant change in the scores. But there's something to be said about comfort level once you become familiar with the exam. You can do that by prepping on your own. I don't work for any of those test prep organizations, but certainly anything that you do in life, particularly with your academics, you need to be prepared for. Whatever that means for you, prepare in advance. We heard about the TOEFL or the IELTS exam. Those are other exams that are used in this process to help measure your intended success in our institutions. Those are things, again, they're tools to help us make intelligent, informed decisions about the likelihood of your success at our institution. So don't overtest, but do prepare. I'll stop pontificating. Oh, there's a good SAT word. Ooh.
One thing to note about the SAT or the ACT, there is a writing section. On this panel, how many look at the writing section? Okay. That doesn't mean you don't take the writing section. You should always at least take one writing section because maybe at that time, when you're taking the exam, you have a list of 10, 12 schools and none of them require the writing section. But you're on a visit to another college and then you stop by at a neighboring college and you're like, oh my God, this is a school for me. And now they require the writing section and you are less than a month away from application deadline. So you wanna make sure that you at least have one on file just in case your list does change. The other thing I wanna talk about, test flexible schools. These are colleges that are open to admitting students if they submit maybe 3 AP exams or just 3 SAT subject tests. They're very flexible in what you could submit to fulfill the standardized exam requirement. I know NYU is one of them, so I would definitely recommend that you go through that list. I have seen students over my course of 10 years in admissions not do well on one standardized exam, but do phenomenal in another one, and that really helps them be more competitive in the application process. The other thing I wanted to talk about is just SAT 2 exams. So if an institution is not requiring them, you don't need to send them. You can always self-report the score on the Common Application, so we'll know how you've done in it, but for example, at Syracuse University, we don't look at it for admission. So if a student sends it to me, my system won't even pick it up. I won't even know that you sent it to me. So then that's just a waste of money. But you do your research, figure out who needs what. Some engineering programs, I know for a fact, do require a math and a science. So you want to make sure you're fulfilling those requirements and try to take those subject tests fairly quickly after you've completed that course, only because the material is fresh in your mind. You tend to do better on them. And then AP exam is kind of the same thing. If we're not requiring it for admissions, we're really not going to see the score. Many institutions will give credit if you have a 4 or 5 on the AP exam, so that kind of comes in the later process. Once you decide you're going to attend an institution that has offered you admission, you would submit all your final transcripts, all your AP exam scores, and then they will determine what classes you can opt out of. Doing that. So just ask your admissions rep if you're not sure how to communicate your AP score to them. Generally self-reported, a lot of institutions will accept that in the application process. So, you know, that doesn't mean if you got a 3, just put a 5 because that'll help you through the application process, because we're going to verify all that information at the end.
Just to reiterate what Robert was saying about not over-testing, I think it's important that you know your academic abilities, and I think you know what test scores reflect accurately your academic abilities. And so there, as colleges, you know, there isn't a need, I think, for you all to kill yourselves, or to really push yourselves, I should say, to get that perfect score. You know, these test scores are one piece of a much larger application. We talked before about the idea of holistic applications, right? We're looking at your application, not at each application piece independently, but we're looking at how all these pieces fit together to tell your story. And so the test score is only one piece of that much larger application that tells your academic and personal story. And so getting that perfect score, right, oftentimes isn't as important as conveying to us through the application who you are, how you're going to add in our classrooms, and how you're going to add to our community outside the classrooms. So, you know, if you've gotten a 1500 on the SAT, that's a great score. You know, putting in the extra hours and testing multiple extra times to get that 1600, you know, won't necessarily make that huge difference in the process because it's one piece of a much larger application that we're considering. If you know you can get a 1600, you know your abilities. I don't want to tell you not to do that, right? 1600s are great. But keep in mind that it's not all about testing.
There's always a range that's published for colleges in terms of what the middle 50% looks like for their admitted student body, and they give a range for a reason, because most institutions don't have a cutoff where it's like, you know, they pull in their applications, all right, anyone under 1200 deny. It doesn't work like that. So most institutions will publish the middle 50% for GPA, for SAT and ACT scores, and that will help you determine how you're going to fall in that pool. And you know, like my colleague said, you know, that 10 point, 20 point isn't going to make a huge difference. You don't want to make testing your hobby. It's better to take your energy, put it in your classes, and do better in your first quarter grades, and you know, be on top of your extracurriculars. Make sure that you're putting a well-rounded essay together. Those things are probably going to help you a little bit more than a 10-point difference on the standardized exam.
Yeah, I think once you're over a certain test score threshold, we know that you're a serious student. You know, you've gotten there, just to add on to that.
Well, I have one or two sort of follow-up questions, but I'm actually would like to pause for a second and give you here the opportunity to ask questions about testing and just the application process in general. Students, do we have questions before I get to my follow-up question? I know that right, Bumie and Jan, is that right? You have microphones. They have the power. Yeah? Is it, you could tap the mic, see if it's...
Okay. So I'm an international student, and what happens is I haven't spent much time in the States, so I have two different transcripts, one from an international school, one from a school here. So do I have to submit both of them even though they both have different grading systems, and how would the colleges evaluate that?
Good question. Maybe we can both go. Great question. Yes. So as you're looking at schools, and you know, we come to visit your high schools, you'll realize that all schools have territory managers, right? And so, for example, you know, I manage Westchester, New York, Long Island, New York, and Ohio. In the same respect, we have our colleagues who just recruit internationally. And so they read those international applications and they understand those transcripts from different parts of the world, right? We know that a transcript, in A levels from England look much different than a regular high school transcript domestically in the States. And so they understand those nuances of what those grading systems look like, what's a competitive score within those grading systems, and so they understand those transcripts essentially. Yes, you will have to submit all of your high school transcripts to us in order to be considered for admission. So that might require you getting in touch with an international school, for example, to have those sent over to the schools that you're applying to.
The only thing I would add is if a school you're coming from internationally is not English-based, and some of us will require a WES evaluation. So if it's, if we can translate it easily, maybe not, but in most cases, some schools' policies it will require a formal translation if it's not an English-based school.
Other questions?
Come on, you can do it. We have faith in you.
I have the domestic equivalent. We have a local transfer into Stony Brook School. How would you approach?
We get that question a lot too. So about the academic story is from every element, from any school you've attended, we would need to see the transcript, the story from the original source. So if you're transferring from, Ward Melville to the Stony Brook School, we would need to see both transcripts from every school. Or if there are 3 schools, it's again the whole story within the context of that particular institution. Another good question. So all the questions are on this side of the room.
Yeah, this side is winning. Can we?
Oh, we can't have that. There you go.
Hi, I'm Avalon. So my question has to do with the discussion around GPA that I've been hearing. Some representatives say that because of the nature of how GPA differs from school to school, there's not really much of a looking at the numerical value, but rather the actual grades that you get in the specific classes that you take. So I was just wondering if that's something that's true or just something that I've just been hearing randomly.
That is very true. Like I said, it's not the NGPA that we're focused on. We're really looking at the progression of your academics all the way from the beginning of 9th grade to, the first quarter of senior year at that point. Another thing to just keep in mind is some institutions will recalculate your GPA because they have their own internal scale. Some colleges will be like, we're only going to look at unweighted GPA. And other colleges will grant different weights for, honors or college prep or AP classes. So it does vary, but I think we can say confidently that most institutions will be very clear about making sure they go through every single year, look at the classes you're taking, thinking about the major that you're about to go into. How did you do well? How did you do in those classes that are in line with your academic interests? Maybe we see that you're strong in the math and science, but like English is your weakness, so we're gonna kind of see for those trends. Are you on an upward trend? That is something that we love to see. Are you up and down? We kind of want to understand why that's the case. So there's a lot of analysis that goes into the transcript. And like I said before, we take into account the institution you attend and how you're challenging yourself with the resources that are available to you. So I can confidently say none of us will just be like, all right, NGPA from this school, all right, you're good to go. We're really trying to get to know your academic ability to the best that we can through the application.
So, ditto. But think of it this way. Strength of curriculum is always number one. How challenged you are in the level of curriculum. We know what's available within each school, so we compare students within the context of their high school experience. We know how many honors or AP or advanced level courses are offered, so we're going to compare students from this school to other students to see, well, are they taking advantage of those opportunities? For some schools, it's imperative. Some colleges will expect every student to be in the highest level of curriculum for that level of college. So number one, it's not just the, as Alice was saying, it's not just the grade point average. It's not just even the grade necessarily in the individual courses. It's, well, what kind of course was that? Because in order for you to be successful in our colleges, we need to make sure that you're used to having challenges academically, and you master those challenges. So level curriculum is number one, then your grades, consistency in those grades. The GPA, again, I like that final end point. It's not about that. It's not the destination, it's sort of the journey there. That's really important.
Yes, NL. And maybe, sorry, this will probably, I think this is a good kind of point, maybe after NL's question. I have one follow-up question, then we'll move on to writing. So NL. Oh, sorry. Okay, we got another question. I didn't see that. Thank you. Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you. Sorry. Hi. I was wondering, some schools tend to be more rigorous than others, so I was wondering, is a 3.8 from a school that has a reputation as being a very rigorous educational institution, does that get taken into consideration versus other schools or not? Because sometimes you hear that, and I'm always curious, like, well, how do they even, there's so many schools. So maybe if you could just speak to that a little bit.
We're really, really good at our jobs.
It is true. We don't know every high school. But yes, we are considering, when you're looking at a transcript, obviously the individual classes that you're taking and the strength of those classes, but we're also considering, to your point, the overall strength of the school and the school's curriculum, right? So we do, take into consideration that this is a very challenging school as we're looking at that. So yes, we're not looking at everyone as if they're all attending the same high schools and that they might just have different classes they can take. We do understand that some schools are more challenging and more academically rigorous, and then that might play into, that endpoint GPA, right, in some of those classes. And in that way, I think when you're looking at transcripts, if we were just looking at the endpoints and we were just looking at the classes you were taking, a computer could do that and we'd be out of business. Thankfully, we don't do that, job security. But there is a nuance, there really is a nuance, I think, into evaluating a transcript and evaluating that transcript within the context of that high school. For example, Stony Brook is a very academically rigorous school, and we understand those things. And as territory managers, it's our job to understand the rigor of each high school when we're evaluating that transcript. So to answer your question, yes.
I would also mention every high school submits a profile, and that profile will outline the courses that are available to the student, maybe what percentage the students are performing on an A, B, C level. We'll see that breakdown. We'll see if there's limits in terms of what AP courses, how many AP courses they can take, and that if the territory manager isn't reading the application, that information is readily available to them, and they would be able to understand that. But we're all here because we're equally invested in this process. So the territory managers take this very seriously. When they're out visiting in the fall, they're meeting with students that are interested in their institution, but they're also taking time to sit down and talk to the counselor and learn about the school. And that's the information that they're going to bring back. So when it's time to read those applications, they can comment on the student's performance in a more in-depth manner.
I almost get defensive about some of my schools when we're reading applications. I'm like, don't read that school. I understand it. So to your point, yeah, we're very invested in the schools and understanding the curriculums.
You're like, no one gets an A in that school, so don't ding the kid that has a B+.
So I think I'm seeing two questions. So Anna L.
Hi, I'm Anna L. This question is also concerning a sort of rumor that I've heard. So all throughout learning about colleges and also taking classes throughout the years, I have heard things about colleges not really, liking students that are more all over the place in their interests and don't really have a pointed major in mind. And I've heard that could possibly be a detriment. And I've been told, just put a major down, something you're interested in, and you can always switch it. So I know this is very open-ended, but could you please offer some comments to that?
So number one, I don't know what I'm going to do the rest of my life. I don't expect a 16, 17, or 18-year-old to know what they're going to do with the rest of their life. One of the unique things about being human is that we're allowed to change our mind. and it's okay, embrace that. Coming open-minded to a college campus, embracing a wide variety of disciplines is certainly an appropriate fit for that student. There are some students who've known since they exited the womb that they wanted to be physicians. That's okay. That's not everyone. And the national statistic indicates that the majority of students across the country, and it's close to 75% now, will change their major at least twice in college, and that's okay as well. Now, we ask that students declare a major in most cases, not all, but in most cases, somewhere in the sophomore year, maybe the end of the sophomore year. There are some exceptions for very structured programs like engineering, where there's a certain pathway that you have to go, and if you get off that pathway, you're going to be there a little bit longer. But being open-minded is not a bad thing, actually. We embrace that. I'd rather see a student be undecided or have multiple interests than try to tell us, I'm going to apply this route because I think that's the easier way for me to get in. That's a no-no. Don't do that, because there might be a roadblock later on if you decide that that's really not the major that you want. So embrace your undecidedness if that's who you are, but also if you have a focus, you can embrace that too, but be understanding that we're human and that can change. So it's not a negative thing for us, as long as it's the right fit for you. That's what this is about. It's not a game the system process. It's embrace who you are and your interests, be open-minded, because when you look at college, your major in most cases, maybe 1/3 to 1/2 of your overall program. So there's still a broader liberal arts education. We're not just educating students for a particular vocation in life, we're educating students for life. So even as a psychology major, I had to do math. Or as an engineer, you need to be able to articulate your ideas and not just in text language. You need to be able to communicate, have strong analytical thinking skills. Those are things that are acquired through a deep, diverse liberal arts education. Let's not get caught up in the label in the beginning.
Thank you.
I think sometimes students get confused when you're looking at institutions that do require to select a particular college when you're applying, and they feel like because they have to select a college within the university that they have to know exactly what they want to study. And that's not necessarily the case. Syracuse University is one of them. You can come in undecided. We have 6 different undecided tracks you can come into. You can come undecided for engineering, undecided for communication, and the most broad approach is undecided for the College of Arts and Science. So it's not that it disadvantages a student. We're just looking for a different type of student. And like Rob mentioned, there might be a roadblock in the near future where students are like, all right, you know what, I'm just going to try to get into the college through this program. But most institutions will say, we cannot guarantee that you can internally transfer to that other major because there might be limitations on the classes that you can take based on the major you're coming into. You might not be able to fulfill the core requirement to get into that other major. Then you're going to have to be, you have to settle for another major at that college or then possibly transfer. So it's better to be true to yourself in the beginning. If you're truly undecided, go in for that. If you kind of, are leaning towards one academic interest, then go for that as well. But just know that there are internal processes that students do have to go through, and it's just not like taking a paper into a dean's office. It's like, all right, I was an engineering student, now I want to be a sports management student, and it just doesn't happen like that. There's usually a lot of guidelines within institutions for students to move from one major to the other.
You may have already addressed this since we got in here about 10 minutes late, and if so, just tell me and I'll meet with you afterwards. But the big early decision process, that ED, that seems to be a pressure point for a lot of folks to find that one school that they're going to use their ED on. What am I going to use it on, quote unquote? Have you addressed the significance of that at all, and also, are there any catches to get out of that, i.e., military academies? As we have a daughter who's looking to try to get into a military academy, can she still go ED at another place, knowing that military academies are not going to notify usually till May 1st that they're in to the Naval Academy or West Point? And are you able to get an exemption from your ED if you are enlisted into the service and going into an academy? So kind of a twofold.
So Yes, it's a hot topic. We did have a conversation about the nature of early decision versus early action. Early decision, again, is very structured. It is the contractual obligation. It's one school to which a student can apply. The other piece of that is once admitted to a school early decision, students have to withdraw their applications to every other school to which they have applied. I haven't heard that the academies are exempt from that. That could be. I've never heard that in my 33 years doing this. So I wonder if early decision may not be the right fit for a student, and maybe looking at early action programs for that student. I always try to caution families about the use of early decision, that it's really the school it's the dream school. It's the school that you fit the academic profile and that you know you want to go there if you're admitted. It's not a strategy. I actually cringe when families talk with me about, we're going to apply early decision, we just don't know to which school. It makes my blood curl, because that is not the purpose of an early program. It's really about fit. This is really my dream school, where I want to go, and I know I'm a good candidate. And that's how we should guide ourselves in the process. Yes, we talked about in some cases there are some schools where they know that you're a sure thing, though. Maybe there is some flexibility. But honestly, in the most selective institutions, that's not going to be the case, because they can defer in the process and take a look at you later on. Yes, UPenn admits 65% of their applicant pool early, but that's not because it's easier. It's because the students who apply early decision are some of the best students in the pool. So it's not a strategy. It's really about fit. Now, that's not to say that there are some schools where it is easier to get in early decision or early action. But again, that commitment is contractual. Student signs, parent signs, counselor signs. And the only thing that, remember that SAT word, exonerates you from that obligation is an unrealistic financial aid packet, which, however, now that the net price calculator is available on our websites, that conversation can happen earlier, and you can fill out the FAFSA really early, and you'll get information about that financial fit earlier. So even that's more and more challenging to be exonerated from. So again, it's really, don't use it as a strategy, use it as this is the right fit, and if there's another school that you're thinking about that might impact whether or not I can get in or should apply, then don't do it. Don't use early decision then if there's a school that I'm not sure I really want to go to, because it might actually take you out of the running for that consideration.
Great. Sorry, yes.
I have a question about just as a parent, like thinking about the application process and your territory managers for this area. So do you see applications and review for only the kids in this particular area? And the broader question is, because the rumors are like if you're from the Northeast, it's so much harder to get into a Northeast school. You'd have higher chances if you went to the Midwest or to the West. And I was just wondering if you can kind of elaborate on sort of as a territory manager, are you only looking at candidates and comparing them to other candidates within this region, or are you looking at them across the whole country?
I think we just go down the line because it might be different. So for Syracuse University, we get about 37,000 applications. There's a little less than 20 people in our office that read those applications. The vast majority come from the New York metro area. So for me to be the sole reader for all of Long Island would not be possible, because I'm above that $6,000 application. I need a raise. I am tired. So we have selected people that are trained in reading applications for a particular territory. And every application is read multiple times. So usually the territory manager will read it, and then depending on the college the student applies to, there's a separate team that would review that application to make sure that they're a good fit for that program. It's just also a second set of eyes to make sure that we don't miss anything. Each person will get a vote of admit, deny, waitlist, or defer. And then the third round of review happens with our deans. And they will look at different institutional priorities when putting that class together. When I read applications, I read by school groups because that helps me just, keep everything straight. If I know I'm just reading students from Stony Brook, I have everything fresh in my mind, what their curriculum is like, what the limitations are, and I go down the list that way. We don't have a cap on the number of students we can take from each high school. We don't have a cap on the number of students we can take from the state of New York. I can't speak on behalf of other institutions, but at Syracuse, we're very open to that, and knowing that, the largest pool comes from this territory, we are fully invested in making sure that they're represented in our class. With that being said, every institution wants diversity on campus, and that can come in many different shapes and forms. So it is good to, have someone from Texas, California, China, India, all within that same class. So we're very conscious of making sure that we're building in that diversity. But, in terms of parents being afraid that, they can only take 6 or 7 students from a school, how is my child going to pan out in that review process? It's not something you would have to worry about at Syracuse University.
Yeah, I think similarly, oh my gosh, can't talk, it's been a long day.
I know, it's been a long day.
Yeah, yeah, we are the same way, right? So the territory manager I'd read an application from Stony Brook, for example, and then we have an admission committee as well. So I would come before my admission committee and essentially present the applicant to them, and we have a discussion before we make that decision. We also don't have caps on the amount of students we're admitting from a high school or from a region, for example. We are conscious of, we do want to build a diverse student body, and so geography certainly plays a role in that. But I don't think that would ever be a reason to not apply to a certain school, let's say in the Northeast, because there's a lot of New York students applying there. When it's all said and done, everything shakes out. If you are a competitive student and you're a good fit for that school and you're meant to be there, you will be there. I think the competitive advantage from a student applying from California for University of Richmond, right? Let's say a student applying from California versus a student applying from New York is almost non-existent. We're conscious of that, but it's not going to be a make or break decision for a student. And so, yeah, it's we're conscious of geography, but we're not capping the amount of students we're admitting from New York, for example, just because we have a lot of New York applicants. We're looking for the students who are going to be the best fit at our institution, and that is what takes precedence over everything else.
Okay. So while I'm not a territorial manager, I'm one of those last eyes on the third round. But it's broader than just where they're coming from. It's also academic diversity. So we could easily fill our class with pre-med students. We have a great journalism program. So we really want to make sure that we're admitting students who are fitting the institutional needs. So we're a Division I athletic program as well. So we have a lot of different check boxes that we're trying to make sure that we're crafting our class. We want to bring in the best and the brightest, certainly. We want to make sure they're going to be successful. If they're not, it's not fair to the student nor to the institution. But we also want to make sure that we represent the real world. And we are a diverse campus academically, geographically, ethnically, culturally, socially, financially, all of those elements. And that's who we are, and we embrace that. So when these eyes are looking, we're looking at, okay, what are we doing here? What do they look like? What are their academic aspirations? How are they doing on their exams? How are they doing outside of the classroom? We're really crafting a class that's really diverse. And that takes a lot of understanding of culture. It takes a lot of understanding of data and research. And we hope we get it right each year. It's not a simple process. It's not just yay, nay, and that's it. It's not a quick little click and we're done. So we do have multiple layers. So we do have folks who read. In our case, because most of our applications come from New York State, all of our counselors, our readers are reading all of those. But we do have a separate group who will read our out-of-state applications, our international students, and then certain academic cohorts by college. And then once they do that reading, then the eyes come in and say, okay, did we get the right class before we send out the admit decisions? So it's really it's a science as well as an art. And we pray each year that it works.
Thank you. All right. So I think in the interest of time, I'm going to have a few questions that we want to make sure that we get to address before we wrap up the evening. And so I think I'll kind of put these questions on the table, and then hopefully we'll have a little more time to open things back up to some questions before we finish. Moving on to writing and supplements, we would like to hear from you, especially what are you looking for the personal statement, and what are you looking for in terms of supplemental writing?
So I think when you're thinking about the essays, this is the advice that I give to all of our students, right? We mentioned earlier that, you know, everything is working together. And so as you're thinking about your personal statement, and if a college requires that supplemental essay, you know, this is your chance to tell us anything about yourself. And in a lot of ways, we're a captive audience. And so it's important to think about, as you're thinking about what do I want to say on my personal statement versus my supplemental essay question, what will a college not learn about me from the rest of my application? Or what is something that I touch upon briefly in my application that I then want to go expand upon? And I find that when students take that approach as they're writing these essays, they're able to paint a very comprehensive picture of who they are as a student and a person for us. This is also the only times in your application where you have the opportunity to show us your personality. You know, a lot of this is very data-driven, right? So your transcripts and your test scores. But this is one time where you can show us who you are. So inject your personality into these essays. Do not be afraid to do that. If you're a funny person, be funny. If you're not funny, don't be funny. You know, if you're introspective, be introspective. The way you write these essays oftentimes tells us just as much about you as the actual content of the essay itself. And then the last thing I would say about writing these essays, and I know this is easy for me to say because I'm reading them, I'm not the one applying to colleges, is have fun with these college essays. I know that this is another thing you have to write on top of all the homework you're already doing, the standardized tests you're taking, all of your extracurricular activities. Have fun. I can promise you, the students who have fun and enjoy writing these, it comes through when we're reading them. And those are the students that I'm saying, oh my gosh, I feel like I really got to know that student in this essay and in this application. And that bodes very well for you all in that application review process. And of course, on top of all those things, we want to make sure that you're a strong writer, good syntax, grammar. Please proofread your essays. We want to make sure that, you know, your writing is strong, but also these are a chance for us to really get to know you and your personality.
Just some do's and don'ts. Again, here comes the Virgo. Absolutely proofread, it's absolutely important. Being creative and being true to yourself is very, very important. But also there's a fine line by being creative and also shocking the reader. We sometimes make decisions based upon an essay that is very inappropriate. So be careful and make sure other folks read your essay. Some students seem to think that if I capture my reader's attention by shocking them, it's going to be a good thing. Well, it may direct the decision, but not the way you want it to go. I had a student once write an essay about a very descriptive scene in a personal situation, and it was not an appropriate topic for a college essay, and I denied his decision based upon that essay. The student was academically qualified, but it was an inappropriate statement to be making in a college essay. You never know who the audience is, so please be careful. Be true to yourself. But again, if your parents are going to be embarrassed by something that you're writing, lo and behold, we will be too, and that impacts the decision. Okay? When we give you a certain amount of space to write an essay, we're not looking for a dissertation. Your editing skills are really, really important. Make sure your English teachers review your essays. They love tearing apart your essays. They're really good at that. Let them do it. Your friends, yeah, maybe not the best judges of reading the essay, but have some professional eyes look at it. And the last thing I'm going to say is, if you're going to choose a topic where you're going to be writing about someone who had a lasting impact on who you are and who you've grown to be, and you tell us all about this wonderful person, maybe you're talking about a grandparent who came to this country and learned the language, worked 3 jobs to support the family. What an incredible individual. I would love to admit Grandpa, but Grandpa's not applying to the school. You are. What did you learn from that experience? How did that experience or that individual shape who you are? It's about you, your story, what you've learned, how you've grown. Be sure to bring that essay topic back to you, because that's the conversation. It's between you, the student, and we, the readers in college admissions. So please be sure to do that as well.
I just want to touch a little bit upon supplement essays. These are extra essays that institutions require. If anything is optional, you should do it. If anything is recommended, you should do it. Because the students that take that extra step really, we get a sense of, all right, they're serious about us, they're serious about the college application process, and these are very positive characteristics. So when you're putting your supplement essay together, I have a couple of tips. Be specific. Make that connection with the university. I read essays all the time where students are like, I want to go into international affairs, I want to study it at Syracuse University because you have 7 study abroad sites. Great. I know we have 7 study abroad sites, but I learned absolutely nothing from you because I can already see that you are applying to international affairs. So the student that takes it a step further and says, well, I see that you have a site in Florence and I'm very interested in X, Y, and Z, and there's a faculty member that's doing work in this field, I would love to take that course. Right there, I got a better understanding of how we fit into your future goals, how can we excel your dreams, and you know, that you really took the time to research us and that you're serious about it. There's something that you also have to be conscious of. It's called demonstrated interest, and this can be you know, tracked in many different ways. When you do a school visit, you do a tour, every time you email your admissions rep, when we do a school visit in the fall and you attend those are all different ways of tracking demonstrated interest, and demonstrated interest can be used differently at every institution. Some will take it very seriously in the first round of application review, and they're going to say, all right, if a student has X amount of demonstrated interest and they're academically admissible, we're going to admit them. But maybe there's another student who is academically admissible, but their demonstrated interest was low. Maybe we'll waitlist that student because we don't know if they're going to attend the institution. So a great way to demonstrate your interest is through the supplement essays. I can easily tell when reading thousands of applications, the student that wrote that supplement essay 5 minutes before the application deadline, because it's kind of in text format and there's no capital I's and it's only 6 sentences long, and maybe there's University of Miami in there instead of Syracuse University. I know, and right there it makes my decision very easy because you didn't take the time to take it seriously. Well, then I can't invest that time and energy into your application. So do your research beforehand. You will know very early on if college requires the supplement essays. And my last tip is you should do the essays the summer before senior year. The prompts are available through Common App very early on. The supplement prompts are also available through institutions very early on in the summer. So you can start working on this, probably have a nice final draft ready, and when you come back to school, have your English teacher look at it and make sure that everything fits and it works. And then that's one less thing you have to worry about when you're trying to get all these applications in. We read thousands of applications. We can tell the voice of a 17-year-old versus a voice of a 54-year-old lawyer. We don't want the 54-year-old lawyer. We want the 17-year-old student. So make sure that your voice does not get lost in this process. This is the one thing you really have control over, because whatever's done on your transcript is done. You can't change that. Your standardized testing are what they are at that point. Letters of recommendations are being written by other people. The essay is the one thing you have control over. That is the one thing that you can really have your personality come through. So like Rob said, just have fun with this. This is really important.
Thank you. That was doing a great job of getting at anticipating a few things that I definitely wanted us to talk about: demonstrated interest, and also sort of other factors that might come into the decision-making process. If I could have you follow up a little bit on our kind of last bullet point there under the decision-making process, right? A number of our students, I think, have families that feel some pressure to employ a kind of professional, independent college counselor. What advice might you offer those families? Are there potential advantages and potential risks involved in that?
I am not.
Let me begin by saying you are very fortunate to have some amazing resources here at the Stony Brook School, which would really preclude you from needing any type of outside resources to help you through the guidance of this process when you have such talent here at the school. Be weary, be leery. Be weary and be leery. When companies or individuals say, "I can get you something, I will advocate for you for a price," it's sort of a dangerous territory. And I know folks who do those kinds of have those kinds of careers and are very successful. But remember, this is a student-driven process. You need to do the research. You need to have all the elements of the application process speak to who you are, because it is your process. And when you get to our campus, and maybe you're going to have an interview with one of us, you're going to need to be able to have a very intelligent conversation about all those elements of the application that you put together, your essay and all those recommendations and whatnot. So use the resources that you have here, and use your own talent and your gut feeling in terms of what is the right fit for you. Those extraneous resources are superfluous.
Another SAT word. I think that sums it up.
Thank you. Yeah. Please.
This year I saw more often I had independent counselors reaching out to me, asking me if there is something missing on a student's application. Every admissions office is going to have a different policy in how they deal with it. At Syracuse University, I'm not going to disclose that information to an independent counselor. I will only disclose it to your counselors, to you, and a parent. That's listed on our system that we can disclose that information to. So you have to be the one advocating for yourself. That's the important thing. And at the end of the day, it is a process about you, and we are here to help as well. I think sometimes students are so intimidated that they don't want to talk to the admissions rep because they don't want to say something wrong, or they don't want to sound dumb or stupid, and that's not the case. We are here to answer your questions. If something is not clear on our website, or you're not sure how to approach a difficult situation that you had in high school and how to talk about it in the application process, we're here to help you with that. And I've worked with this counseling team for over 8 years. You are in phenomenal hands. I can't tell you the amount of times that a counselor has called me and be like, all right, look, this is a situation, this is what students thinking about, give me your opinion. How do we go about this? That open communication, they have not with just the people that are here, but with hundreds of schools out there. So really value that connection that you have at your school.
Great. I think let's just see if there are a few more questions from the audience here, and then maybe some final thoughts if we've got some time. Yes.
So the question is, for financial aid packages between, applying early decision versus early action versus regular decision, how does that packaging work? And then the second part of that question was, in terms of every institution, we all have different methodologies, our Office of Financial Aid, in terms of what are the things that we're looking for to create that financial aid package, and what are those things we're looking for, and how do they differ? I can speak for Richmond specifically, and I'm sure my colleagues can talk about their institutions. For us, there's no difference between a student who is applying early decision versus early action or regular decision, what that financial aid package will be. So for us specifically, we're need blind. So we're not looking at your financial aid package, and we meet 100% of all demonstrated need, regardless if what application pool you've applied into. So, you know, if you're applying regular decision versus early decision, that won't affect your financial aid package, at least at Richmond specifically. And yes, every school does have different methodologies for what are they looking for to create that package. And I think that goes back to the idea of research. You know, knowing, okay, I want to apply to these schools, and knowing that your package might look a little bit different, right? Some schools require the FAFSA and the CSS profile. Some just require the FAFSA. So they're looking at different things. Call the Office of Financial Aid. Check out their net price calculator ahead of time because, yeah, it is very possible it will be different. And I think it's a really good point about do your research because it could be different. And even though your situation is the same, we might be considering slightly different things as we create that package.
So just think of it this way. For those who are may not be as familiar with these forms are the free application for federal student aid. Yay, it's free. And here is the premise here. The federal government determines what the expected family contribution, your EFC, is going to be based upon income information that you provide. And that comes right now from your taxes. It's from prior year. It's actually prior. So as you know, maybe if those who've gone through this process before, in the past, you really couldn't apply for financial aid until after January 1 of the senior year. And now it's October 1. So you can actually start this process a lot earlier, and it's based upon older data, not just, not the current tax situation. But it is government-driven. So whatever the government feels that expected family contribution is going to be, that's what it is. What the schools then do might be different, because some schools may have more institutional need awards that they can give to enhance. So it's going to depend. Some schools who are need blind like myself, but do not meet need. So unlike Richmond, we don't. We try our best to do that, but we don't necessarily have the resources to do that. But then the other part of the equation is not just need-based awards. Are there merit-based awards that will be available? Have nothing to do with your expected family contribution, have nothing to do with the FAFSA or the profile. It's about talent. So it could be academic talent, it could be, artistic talent, it could be athletic talent. So are there supplemental types of funding that the institutions have that can help put together this package that's going to help you realistically fit that school financially? And the time frame is, realistically, all that information should be in your hands at least 1 month prior to that May 1st deadline, so that you can actually sit down with all of your schools you have admit decisions with, and you have all your financial aid packets, and you can make some realistic decisions as to what is the best choice and what is the most realistic choice. Sometimes families are disappointed, and it happens. And sometimes families think they can negotiate, and there are some schools that might get into that. And then there are those of us who do not do that at all. But then there are cases where a financial situation changes. A parent loses a job, or there's an illness, or something happened that changed the course of that story in the process, where perhaps the financial aid office can reevaluate the award based upon this new information that wasn't there at the time when you actually applied for aid. But I would caution you about trying to negotiate versus trying to explain a change that's happened to help look at the award through a different lens. But it's a conversation that happens, and it's a personal conversation. Don't be afraid to talk with someone from financial aid who can at least explain the award if it's not what you hoped. But I caution you to think that it's common practice to say, oh, well, I can do better, and I'll get them to do better, because that doesn't necessarily happen across the board.
We're a little different at Syracuse. We are a need-aware institution, so the financial information is taken into account in our third level of review. We do offer need-based aid. We do have merit-based aid. We have early decision and regular decision. We do offer merit-based scholarship for early decision, but the pool is limited in terms of how much we're going to distribute. And we usually use most of it for regular decision. It's also because we only bring in 27% of our class through early decision. So the majority is coming through regular decision. That's why we need to use that money in that pool more. This comes down to asking the admissions rep so they can disclose this type of information so that you are aware, especially if you're going into an early decision type of school, how a potential financial aid package may look like. And every institution has a tuition discount, and it varies across the board. They will not disclose that to families, but that's where that difference does come into play. That, you know, one might offer double digits while the other one offers single digits. And when it comes to appeals and trying to negotiate financial aid packages, I see it very often. Like, a lot of students apply to Stony Brook, SUNY Binghamton, and then they'll say, well, my tuition is coming out to X amount, but I'm like, you're comparing apples and oranges. And they'll be like, well, Fordham offered me this and you're at this, but every institution's cost of living is different. You know, the opportunity to apply for additional financial aid for Syracuse, we have a number of opportunities. So we usually encourage students to look at that as well. We are one of those institutions that we will not negotiate merit-based aid. Whatever we offer in the first round of decisions, that's what, you know, we have. This is also something you want to keep in mind if a student is on wait list. A lot of parents will say, well, even if they come off the wait list, I need at least $15,000 worth of scholarship. But at that point, majority of the funds have been already offered to the students that come off, that were admitted in the first round. So if you do put yourself on a wait list for an institution, always be very conscious of the financial commitment there, because most likely institutions will not be able to offer any money at that point, and it'll just be federal, or if you're applying to a New York State school, you have the TAP, you have Pell. But they vary across the board. I wish we had a more, you know, structured response for you, but just ask the admissions rep, and they'll try to give you as much information as they can so you have a better understanding of what you're coming into.
Hi, my name is Nadia. So I was wondering how, like, the recruitment process works for, like, athletes or, like, just sports in general, and how different it is between each sport.
Yeah.
So the question is regarding student athletes and what the process is, and there's a different timeline, and yes. So for the, you know, there are different levels of competition within athletics, Division 1, 2, and 3. You know, Division 1, at the more competitive level, I represent one. Well, so do you.
Oh, no.
So do you. we all
I had
do.
an entire information session about this morning.
So you made me go first. So think of it this way: if you are a courted athlete, you know, our offices have liaisons with the athletics department. So our admissions folks and our coaches are aware of who's on the radar, and so that. Remember, it is the Office of Admission, though, that does make the decision. The offer of admission comes from the Dean of Admission, not the Director of Athletics or the coach, despite what you might hear sometimes. Sometimes there's miscommunication, and the coach might say, yes, you're admitted, as opposed to what he or she might have meant to say was, you are admissible, you meet the criteria and whatnot, but you still have to go through the process, and there's a review process and whatnot. But sometimes we do look at the application with that different lens because, as we mentioned before about institutional needs, when we're shaping our class, you know, we are looking to create a class that has a wide variety of attributes, and Division I schools are very in tune with making sure we have the highest level of talent of our athletes, because we have an expectation that we're going to be winning quite often, right? That brings more revenue to the campus and all those good things. So the process starts a little bit earlier for our student athletes, and there's another layer in terms of who's looking at it. But again, the final decision does rest with the admissions officer or the admissions dean. The scholarship, however, you know, the athletic scholarship is typically, and this may vary, and my answer might be very different. The admissions office is not involved in the determination of the athletic scholarship. Okay, so that's a conversation that you need to have with the coaches. Those decisions are made in that house, whereas the admission decisions are finally made in our house. Okay. But remember, you are a student athlete, and the expectation, you're a student first, and you need to be successful at an institution because we are producing academic scholars. Remember that.
And funding does differ from sport to sport within a college. I can't disclose which one, but I have one team that my understanding is they only have $5,000 in scholarship money versus another team that has significantly more. So when Rob mentioned that you have, it is all determined based on the athletics department. So have that conversation with the coaches if you are interested in playing for a sports team. I think junior year is a little bit late because you're usually on the radar for coaches early on, but students could definitely participate in club and intramural level sports on campus. Walk-ons, I think, vary from institution to institution, so it's something that you can also ask the coaches in terms of what process is in place for that.
So I have been advised that it is 9 o'clock, and we have promised the residence halls that the boarders will be back. So what I would, but I know there are probably still a couple more questions. So I guess what I would ask is that we give the boarders the ability to get back to their dorms so we can honor that promise. But also I want to also suggest if you have a few more questions, you should make that happen. Yep. Yeah, so before we dismiss, I would like to invite us to show some appreciation for our panelists. So thank you so much for coming.